The blockades of the Gaza Strip refers to a land, air, and sea blockade on the Gaza Strip by Israel and Egypt from 2007 to present. After the 2005 disengagement from the Gaza Strip by Israel, in 2006, Hamas won the Palestinian legislative election, triggering the 2006-7 economic sanctions against the Palestinian National Authority by Israel and the Quartet on the Middle East after Hamas refused to quit violence, respect previous agreements and recognize Israel. In March 2007, Hamas and Fatah formed a Palestinian Authority national unity government headed by Ismail Haniyeh. Shortly after, in June, Hamas took control of the Gaza Strip in the course of the Battle of Gaza, seizing government institutions and replacing Fatah and other government officials with its own. Following the takeover, Egypt and Israel largely sealed their border crossings with Gaza, on the grounds that Fatah had fled and was no longer providing security on the Palestinian side. Israel maintains that the blockade is necessary to limit Palestinian rocket attacks from the Gaza Strip on its cities and to prevent Hamas from obtaining other weapons. Prior to its 2011 opening of the Rafah crossing, Egypt maintained that it could not fully open its side of the border since completely opening the border would represent Egyptian recognition of the Hamas control of Gaza, undermine the legitimacy of the Palestinian National Authority and consecrate the split between Gaza and the West Bank. The blockade has been criticized by UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon, the United Nations Human Rights Council and other human rights organizations, a criticism that has been officially supported by United States administrations. In June 2010, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said the humanitarian needs in the Hamas-controlled area must be met along with legitimate Israeli security concerns. In September 2011, a UN panel of inquiry, assigned by UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon, concluded in the Palmer report that the naval blockade was legal, based on the right of self-defense during a period of war, and had to be judged isolated from the restrictions on goods reaching Gaza via the land crossings. Concerning the restrictions on goods reaching Gaza via the land crossings, the Palmer report stated that they were a significant cause of Gaza's unsustainable and unacceptable humanitarian situation. A fact-finding mission for the UN Human Rights Council chaired by Richard Goldstone, a former judge of the International Criminal Court, as well as a group of 5 independent UN rights experts concluded that the blockade constituted collective punishment of the population of Gaza and was therefore unlawful. UN envoy Desmond Tutu, United Nations Human Rights Council head Navi Pillay, the International Committee of the Red Cross and most experts on international law consider the blockade illegal. Background: 1989 to 2004. Since June 1989, Israel has formally restricted the movement of Palestinians, imposing a magnetic card system whereby only those with such a card were allowed to leave the Strip. Israeli authorities did not issue magnetic cards to released prisoners, former administrative detainees, or people who had been detained and released without charges being filed against him. January 1991 marked the beginning of the permanent closure policy, whereby each resident of Gaza who desired to travel within Israel or the West Bank was required to have a personal exit permit. In March 1993, Israel imposed an overall closure on Gaza with newly built checkpoints, and, from October 2000, Israel imposed a comprehensive closure on the Gaza Strip. When the Al-Aqsa Intifada broke out in September 2000, Israel put trade restrictions on the Gaza Strip and closed the Gaza International Airport. The economic effects worsened after the creation of a buffer zone in September 2001. that would seal all entry and exit points in the Palestinian territories for security reasons. After the 9th of October 2001, movement of people and goods across the Green Line, dividing the West Bank from Israel, and between the Gaza Strip and Israel, was halted, and a complete internal closure was effected on 14 November 2001. The worsening economic and humanitarian situation raised great concern abroad. According to the UN Conference on Trade and Development, in January 2003, the Israeli blockade and closures had pushed the Palestinian economy into a stage of de-development and drained as much as US $2.4 billion out of the economy of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. 2005 Agreement on Movement and Access. The Israel Defense Forces left the Gaza Strip on 1 September 2005 as part of Israel's unilateral disengagement plan. And Agreement on Movement and Access between Israel and the Palestinian Authority was concluded in November 2005 to improve Palestinian freedom of movement and economic activity in the Gaza Strip. Under its terms, the Rafah crossing with Egypt was to be reopened, with transits monitored by the Palestinian National Authority and the European Union. Only people with Palestinian ID, or foreign nationals, by exception, in certain categories, subject to Israeli oversight, were permitted to cross in and out. 2006-2007 Economic sanctions. The 2006-2007 economic sanctions against the Palestinian National Authority were economic sanctions imposed by Israel and the Quartet on the Middle East against the Palestinian National Authority and the Palestinian territories following the January 2006 legislative elections that brought Hamas to power. The sanctions were imposed after Hamas refused to renounce violence, to respect previous agreements and to recognize the State of Israel. In March 2007, the Palestinian Legislative Council established a national unity government, with 83 representatives voting in favor and 3 against. Government ministers were sworn in by Mahmoud Abbas, the chairman on the Palestinian Authority, in a ceremony held simultaneously in Gaza and Ramallah. Throughout 2006, the Kani crossing remained only partially operational, costing Palestinians losses of $500,000 a day, as less than 10% of the Gaza Strip's minimal daily export targets were achieved. Basic food commodities were severely depleted, bakeries closed and food rationing was introduced. Limitation of basic goods. Israel allows limited humanitarian supplies from aid organizations into the Gaza Strip, according to the coordinator of government activities in the territories of the Israel Defense Forces, in May 2010. This included over 1.5 million liters of diesel fuel and gasoline, fruits and vegetables, wheat, sugar, meat, chicken and fish products, dairy products, animal feed, hygiene products, clothing and shoes. According to Gisha NGO, items that have at various times been denied importation into Gaza in 2010 include jam, halva, razor blades, light bulbs, candles, matches, books, musical instruments, crayons, clothing, shoes, mattresses, sheets, blankets, pasta, margarine, glucose, varieties of canned food, coffee, chocolate, nuts, food wrappers, fishing rods, coriander, sage, vinegar, nutmeg, cardamom, biscuits, and potato chips. Varieties of baby formula, wheat grain, shampoo, plaster, tarpaulin sheets for huts, irrigation pipes, gas for soft drinks, size A4 paper, buttons, cosmetics, toys, newspapers, industrial salts, food flavoring, and livestock such as chicken, donkeys, and cows. Israel announced on June 2010 it would allow all strictly civilian goods into Gaza while preventing certain weapons and dual-use items from entering the Hamas-run Gaza. According to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, at various times, Israel has blocked goods including wheelchairs, dry food items, and crayons, stationery, soccer balls, and musical instruments. International aid group Mercy Corps said it was blocked from sending 90 tons of macaroni and other foodstuffs. After international pressure, Israeli authorities said that they were giving the shipment a green light. Israel was also reported to have prevented aid groups from sending in other items, such as paper, crayons, tomato paste and lentils, because of an Israeli ban on the importation of construction materials for fear of Hamas using them to build bunkers and fortified positions from which to shell villages in Israel. The UN Relief and Works Agency built at least one mud brick home, and planned to build up to 120. Aid agencies say that food waits on trucks and in warehouses, and many basic items are rejected by Israel as luxuries, or are turned down for unexplained reasons. Tin cans are banned because the steel from which they are made might be used to build weaponry or structures by Hamas, making it hard for Gazan farmers to preserve their vegetables. At one time the only fruit allowed was bananas, allegedly because the Israeli official owned a banana plantation. Limitation system. In September 2007, the Israeli cabinet voted to tighten the restrictions on the Gaza Strip. The cabinet decision stated, "The movement of goods into the Gaza Strip will be restricted, the supply of gas and electricity will be reduced, and restrictions will be imposed on the movement of people from the Strip into it." In January 2010, the Israeli group Gisha took Israeli authorities to court, forcing them to reveal which goods were permitted and which goods weren't. The Israeli government replied that canned fruit, fruit juices and chocolate are blocked, while at the same time canned meat, canned tuna, mineral water, sesame paste, tea and coffee are allowed into the Gaza Strip. Banned items also included coriander, shampoo and shoes. In October 2010, papers were released which revealed a system to maintain the minimum level of basic goods entering the Strip. It contained upper and lower warning lines, identifying surpluses and shortages of listed products in Gaza. In October 2012, an Israeli court forced Israel's coordinator of government activities in the territories to release a document that detailed red lines for food consumption in the Gaza Strip during the 2007 blockade. According to the COGAT, the document was a rough draft, and never actually implemented. He went on further to say that there was never even any discussion after the document had been drafted. The document calculates the minimum number of calories necessary to keep Gazans from malnutrition and avoid a humanitarian crisis. This number was converted to a number of daily truckloads, the number being decreased to account for food produced in Gaza, and further on the basis of culture and experience of the Gazans. This reduction, if implemented, would have resulted in an increase in sugar and a decrease in fruits, vegetables, milk, and meat. Gisha, an Israeli human rights group, said that in fact the number of truckloads allowed into Gaza was less than stipulated in the calculation. The UN said that if the policy was intended to cap food imports, it would go against humanitarian principles. The body responsible for the calculation said its intent was to ensure no shortages occur, not to cap food imports. Israeli officials now acknowledge the restrictions were partly meant to pressure Hamas by making the lives of Gazans difficult.